Alright guys, running it back with another replay for you. This one is going to be Lizardman versus Nurgle, which is an interesting matchup. Nurgle, obviously very tanky, very difficult to crunch off the field, and Lizardmen are obviously also really tanky and difficult to crunch off of the battlefield. Really good healing options with Bastillodons. I decided to bring two in this particular matchup because I figured, you know, I mean, it's Nurgle. Nurgle's going to have great healing and Mortis engines and stuff, and I want something that's going to be able to consistently provide value in that department. With that in mind, I brought the Skink Priest. I don't honestly care too much for summon spells. They're so ridiculously expensive. And yes, they provide some good punch against light armor, which Nurgle does not have a ton of for the single target entities that, you know, this Manticore typically wants to be on. But still, I think it's so much more valuable to just be casting Flock of Doom and Wissen's Wild Form. And in this matchup, Pan's Impenetrable Pelt isn't going to be stupendously useful because there is a lot of magic damage on demon rosters, but mortal units do not have that, and they have become quite meta for a lot of the demon armies, so it is nice to have in the back pocket if you get an opportunity to use it. But you'll see mostly I'm just using Flock of Doom in this match. With the fact that these guys have lots of physical resist and the Chaos Warriors do have good armor, I decided to bring the Sacred Croxigores. Magic damage and really strong weapon strength. I figured I'd be able to put a good hurting on the elements of my army that my opponent was going to be bringing in, and you'll see how they do over the course of the match. Some Cold Wind Riders, you know, I knew that my opponent would be bringing Chaos Warriors. These guys are pretty effective. Really great armor piercing. Some cold ones, feral cold ones, they're really good. You know, they do really good work, honestly. Great armor piercing, decent stats, and really high armor. So they can jump in here and do good work against, you know, everything that Nurgle has outside of, obviously, the armor piercing stuff, which isn't nearly as much as you would think. Lots of Saurus, you know, for a strong front line, and 2 Chameleon Skinks. And then the real tricky pick that I brought was Axolotl. And the reason I brought this guy was precisely to counter, like, Ku'Gath or Festus or an Exalted Great Unclean One. And he's got, you know, lots of ammunition, can shoot the whole game, and does a lot of damage, and provides poison, which is really nice. This Golden Blowpipe, does pretty good. This was my first Lizardman game, so I wasn't too experienced with knowing what to do. So you'll see that I make some, I make a few pretty big mistakes at various points, but, you know, it was a really scrappy, well-played game by my opponent, and we'll jump in here, get this thing going. I've been rambling long enough, and, you know, this is what y'all came here to see. Black Ark is a pretty great map for Lizardmen, I would say, quite honestly, because Chameleon Skinks are quick enough to be able to cover enough ground and even spread out and overlap fire to force your opponent to have to deal with them. So I think bringing more Chameleon Skinks actually is a better idea than just the 2, but, you know, 2 was honestly plenty in this game. So, I'm not entirely sure. I think against Zinch, you'd probably want to bring more than just 2. Probably want to bring 3 or 4. Probably 4, honestly. Because they're just so damn good. Here, you can see I bring out the Salamander hunting pack. And, again, these guys were another tech against these big, scary lords that Nurgle can bring in. I mean, Ku'Gath is terrifying, the Exalted Great Unclean One is pretty terrifying, Festus is terrifying. One thing that they all have in common, though, I mean, disregarding Ku'Gath, who's got decent armor, 70's nothing to sneeze at, still not amazing, but The Exalted Grid and Clean One and Festus both only have 30 armor or so, give or take, I'm pretty sure. Here you can see Axolotl doing really good damage against this guy, putting in some pretty good pressure on him. I really probably should have focused more on staying on top of this Soul Grinder the whole game with Axolotl. You can see here he takes a shot right to the chest. Those big loogies that Ku'Gath loves shooting out. Look at that. Oh my god. It's disgusting. Just rips a nasty little nurgling right out of his chest, hurling it down the field like a quarterback, man. He's got an arm on him. Oh my god. Anyways, Salamander Hunting Pack are trying to get away from that. You know, I don't want to lose too many models on these guys. But the Rev Crystals could heal them up. Another reason why I brought them, to keep them alive. Down here on the low ground, I got my Chameleon Skinks caught up a little bit, pushing too far forward to poke into the Horsemen and the Champions. But they're still relatively healthy. They're a bit spread out, but my opponent's really trying to push forward and keep me off the objective. Over here, the Throwing Axe is doing good damage to my Bastiladon. He's not really loving that, but now I've got all of my ranged elements in here where they need to be. And, woof, it's going to be kind of ugly for my opponent here, as you can see. Chameleon Stalkers running in, crunching into these Marauder Horsemen, doing good damage. These Horsemen are getting picked apart by the Salamanders and the Chameleon Skinks. This fight is going really, really, really well for me right now, as you can tell. Up here on the high ground, posturing going on. I've got my units just spread out here waiting. Bringing this Bastiladon down here because I wanted to try and drop a heal on this one or on the Chameleon Skinks, or just whatever I could get my hands on that was a little tattered. And here you go. Flock of Doom going down on these Furies that are desperately trying to get on top of my Salamanders. My opponent's pushing really, really hard into my backfield here, really putting some stress on my, you know, skirmishing elements, honestly, which I was a little bit surprised at, frankly. Good shots coming in here from the Soul Grinder. You're going to see how much value that guy gets over the course of this match. Axolotl finally got caught up a bit by the Plague Bears, escaped finally. You can see how much damage he's putting on Ku'Gath, too. I mean, that 480 armor-piercing damage, missile strength, nothing to sneeze at, man. Really good stuff. Fight's kicking off up here, and down here on the low ground, I get the Cold One Riders jumping in here and getting the sandwich and forcing these guys to start routing, putting them in a bad spot and giving me an advantage. But the Furies, I couldn't get them off in time, and they are just absolutely ripping apart these Salamanders. A big loss for me. You know, that's what I had down here to try and deal with the Soul Grinder, which is just absolutely destroying my poor infantry elements down here. These Sauruses and the Chameleon Stalkers. But these guys are, I believe they got spotted now, but they're not going to take too terrible damage, and they can dodge back and forth. But I won the objective down here clearly enough to put me in a position where all that damage isn't going to be making too much account of anything. My opponent trying to break these Saurus off, which is a really good play by him. I mean, you can see the amount of damage they're taking. These guys throw their axes in combat too, so they do amazing DPS in melee. Like, they do their normal attacks and they're just, you know, hurling their axes in here, really shredding these guys. But they hold long enough for me to be able to get the counter sandwich, if you will. And you can see the charge bonus that these guys have and the armor piercing is enough to, or the weapon damage in conjunction with armor piercing is enough to crush through them and force them off the battlefield. Keeping this objective mine, putting me in a decent position. Down here on the low ground, Axolotl went fisticuffs with the Soul Grinder for a minute there, got beat up kind of bad, so I pulled him back a little bit, try and keep him safe. Chameleon Stalkers, I'm just going all the way into the backfield, try and kill these horsemen off. Just trying to stress my opponent's micro as much as possible. And back here, he just kind of forgets about these Furies, which I don't entirely blame him. I mean, they're a bit disjointed from the rest of the battle, and there's so much going on up here in the middle that he's really trying to focus in on and trying to get good engagements for. Here, these Plague Bearers are in a pretty bad position. A really great Stream of Corruption going down. It does huge damage to both these units. And you can see, I got my cohorts in here. They're really chucking in their little javelins, poisoning these guys, and doing great damage against their low armor. But still, just tons of swarming stuff coming in here. And Axolotl is trapped up yet again. I thought he would be a good combatant against the Soul Grinder. For whatever reason, he is just getting his ass kicked. I mean, it's just getting untenable for him. So I'm trying to run away, but he's not going to be able to escape for long. I've got too much going on here to be able to focus solely on saving him. And he's gotten good value already for what he's done. 1300's not bad. I mean, he's only a like 1300 point lord with his kit. But anyways, here's the big heavy hitter. This is where the Sacred Croxigors shine, is in getting rid of all of these squishy elements that the Nurgle forces can bring. Little sloppy on my part. I dropped the charge, but you know, they're going to be getting in here on these Nurglings and doing good damage. Just trying to win this blob fight. I wasn't playing too hot. Really had a lot of blobs here that were not in great positions that I really wanted them to be in. A Flock of Doom coming down. You can see how much damage it's putting on these guys while they're getting picked apart by everything else. And you know, this was a scary spot for me to be in. He did have quite a bit here, and my really tanky elements to my army, outside of my Bastillodons and stuff, were gone. All my Saurus are dead. But you can see here, look at the damage that these Salamanders are doing. If Ku'Gath is allowed to stay on this point, he can solo most everything here. He's impossible to deal with in melee combat. So I really had to do something to push him away. And man, are these Salamanders effective for that. I mean, you can see he's having to pop a Fleshy Abundance, an upgraded one too, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a big Winds of Magic commitment, which really prevents him from utilizing him in other areas. Sacred Croxigors finally crushed off those Nurglings, and the infested ones are jumping in here on top. Opponent, yet again, diving really hard to try and deal with these Salamanders, which he really needs those Furies for, and you can see he finally notices them and gets them moving. And by this point, I had known that they were in that corner, and I'd been trying to keep an eye on them. But I had lost, I was so focused on trying to keep my Salamanders away from these Nurglings that I was running them directly into the line of path of these guys.
Take it back.
And putting them in a kind of awkward position. I noticed finally what's going on here, so I'm trying to run them away. I should have split them, but there's 2 units here, so maybe that wouldn't have been the best idea, actually, in hindsight. Over here, I finally lose the low ground. My forces just got bombarded off by the Soul Grinder, and the Marauder Horseman came down here and put some more pressure, and my opponent's now got a double cap on me. But I do have a good lead. I'm not too worried about it at this point. I'm really just focused on maintaining this value trading that I've got, because at this point I had a pretty good lead on him, about 1,500 I believe, and I really wanted to continue to widen that. Another Flock of Doom coming in. It's so good. The upgraded version is so good at killing off Furies and stuff. And as you can see, I dropped the Rev Crystal heal on both of these guys so that they could just sit in here and also provide DPS, because they're not terrible in melee. They're going to lose to Furies if they're by themselves, which is why I had the Croxigors in there, and they did work against the Furies. Really pushed them off well. But you can see, man, those throwing axes do so much damage to them. That's the one thing you need to be afraid of on the Nurgle side of things, is those throwing axes. Try and keep these guys away, and try and use your Rev Crystal heals to best possible advantage. But I've done what I needed to do. I've held on to my home objective, and even though I've got this double cap going down here. I've managed to bank enough resources to bring in all of these swords, just a massive front line. And I'm going to be spreading these guys out. And as you can see, the Soul Grinder is out of ammunition. Not very good for my opponent. I would have probably unsummoned this guy at this point. They're not great in melee. I mean, the poison is nice, but almost everything on Nurgle's roster has poison, right? I mean, Plague Bears, Nurglings, Chosen, I believe even the Chaos Warriors. I mean, look at this. They're just poison everywhere. You don't really need them for that, so just unsummon them and try and get some more units developed out onto the field. My opponent, honestly making a mistake and losing these guys to all of these Croxigors and really getting slapped up pretty bad. You can see they're still throwing in here, and they, poor guy, down for the count. But at the end of the day, they can still get their heals, and they're going to be staying in this fight for a long time yet, outlasting the ammunition from these guys too. These Cold Wind Riders are, well, you know, they're pretty tattered, but they've put good value and work in, you know, dealing with a lot of the armored Chaos Warriors that were over here in that first fight, the one that my opponent had, I believe. Over here, just more Furies diving in. These Salamanders are in a bad spot. I mean, there's only so much I can do with what I've got here. I bring in some more Skink Skirmishers. They're pretty good at peeling Chaos Furies, honestly. They have poison missiles to slow them down while your ranged elements try and escape, you know, because Salamanders are pretty quick. And it gives them a decent shot, but more Furies coming in. They've just managed to get this one off the field. But this other one's healthy and now in a good position to be protected by all of these units. My opponent making a mistake, further committing these Furies, needed... The route was on, needed to stay on these guys and get them off the field, but I'm gonna turn around with these guys. I'm gonna try blasting in here with them. I was debating whether I needed to pull them back or not. Wasn't really sure. Down here on the low ground, my sources are in. You know, they've got the fights they want. Probably needed to swap the target location of these two guys. But Source Warriors still do, they have great weapon strength, as you can see, and decent stats. And the Soul Grinder's just slowly getting pulled down over time. Over here, I was debating what I was going to do with these Salamanders, and I decided to bring them down here, because, you know, Soul Grinder's in a bad spot to get isolated, so I figured that's what I was going to be trying to do. More Nurglings running in, still just a waste. Chameleon Skinks back on the field and, you know, just kiting them back and just putting work in. You know, they're not getting any value and they're just dying slowly. Good shot coming in here from Ku'Gath. Really trying to get off my infantry, but I've still got so much here, you know. He really needs to be focusing on the low ground here, bringing more elements down here to do the fighting, which is why I think getting the Soul Grinder off the field would have been the best bet, so that you can get the refund and bring out more pressure elements. Because as you can see, I'm winning this fight slowly but surely. And my opponent really doesn't want this to be happening right now. Soul Grinder pulls back and gets on top of the Salamander hunting pack. These guys do have armor piercing, so they can do some chip damage to this guy. And really, I just wanted to keep it here until I could get the Croxigors moving in this direction. And kind of wanted to see if he would take the bait in running back after these guys, because these are the element that's going to keep Ku'Gath in check. Because like I said, Ku'Gath is impossible to deal with in melee. He's got the Mortis Engine effect, wherever it is. I'm not sure where, but regardless, it's there. It'll just kill all my infantry, even do some good damage to cavalry, and the Chameleon Skinks don't do enough DPS to really chop him off. So if my opponent really needed to be pushing in now, because look how close the points are. The more pressure he's putting on me, the harder it is for me to effectively control the objectives. And I've lost the lead, you know? I didn't think I'd have such a hard time retaking this objective. That just speaks to the staying power that Nurgle has. So I am really being forced to commit more and more stuff down here. Luckily, the Sacred Croxigores with their magic damage are able to get on this guy, and they just put a beat down on him, you know? This is not a fight with the Soul Grinder ones. And with the Salamanders, oof. These guys are so accurate, too. I didn't realize just how much so. But look, here you go. I am pathing these Feral Cold ones through. They're going to cap the objective in the process. Finally get me to a position where I can retake the lead. And they're going to just dive in here and just hold up this huge, monstrous blob of Nurgle forces as long as possible, man. You know, I don't want this on the objective just yet because I really want to finish off these Plague Bearers and Marauders who are doing good work. But now I've got 2 healthy, or 1 healthy, and 3 tattered units here. Skink Priest hanging out, waiting to drop some what few winds of magic I had left if the opportunity arises. And yeah, you can see here these Plague Bearers and the Marauders taken offline, and now these Chaos Warriors are going to be fighting this huge blob, which is honestly not great for them, because the Sacred Croxigores, they're going to do some really good damage to these guys. Here we go, yet another Flock of Doom coming in here. This is just a regular one, so it's not going to do as much damage as the upgraded version. Still does some decent work, though. I mean, picks through a bit of health on both these units. And my opponent desperately trying to get the capture weight again. But yet again, another commitment of units down here. And my opponent finally pushes it up here. And you can see, look, Ku'Gath, another Salamander unit comes in. And look how much damage they're doing to him. He's desperately trying to reach them. But it's just too much firepower for him to deal with. Out of winds of magic at this point, and just unbelievable. Just absolutely getting roasted. Dead and gone. These guys don't need to do anything else now at this point. My opponent committing the Marauder Horsemen in here, trying to just dive through the middle and get on top of these ones while the Furies take care of these. But they're going to rout in the process. They're taking a lot of fire, and you can see, look at this. Damage sustained, melee contact, attacked in the rear, frightened, all of that, and they're fairly healthy still, but they're just gone. They're not going to be coming back in here and threatening these guys for a hot minute.
Unending glory is yours.
And you can see I just managed to hold long enough and you know, get that win on the victory tickets. I mean, oh my God, this was a great game. Whew, it was pretty close in value for most of it. My opponent did a great job of taking care of my Salamanders at a couple different points, but you can see the value they still got. I mean, paying for themselves pretty much. Sacred Croxigores didn't do as hot as I wanted them to, but my opponent was playing around them pretty well. And, you know, these guys did do what they needed to do. They killed what I needed them to in the time that they had. Like the Soul Grinder there at the end, and the Furies when they had a couple of good dives on my stuff. You know, I mean, look at the value that these guys got. That's pretty decent. These ones didn't do so good, because my opponent just kind of threw them away a couple of times, but, you know, did get the Salamanders really good at one point. You can see the value that these throwing axemen get. Really good. Such a solid, effective unit. Chaos Warriors, good value. Man, these Plague Bearers, just holding for forever, getting good work in too. Ku'Gath didn't do too hot. Too many pressure elements, keeping him away from the objective. I'm not sure what you bring as Nurgle against the Lizardmen, because there's so many good options for Lizardmen to snipe your lords. Chameleon Skinks, good value. I mean, I guess you bring Festus and just out-heal everything, maybe. I'm not sure, though. It's a hard one. I mean, Ku'Gath was a pretty good choice because of how meaty he is, but he's so slow and so vulnerable to Salamanders that maybe it's just not worth it. Axolotl 1500, even though he got killed pretty early in the battle. If I'd kept him around, he would have been very effective and probably would have outright killed the Soul Grinder, which I really... Not killing the Soul Grinder put me in a bad spot because it bombarded me off of that side objective. pretty effectively and put me in a really scary position for most of the battle. Rev crystals didn't do too much damage value per se, but the healing is where the money is really at. I mean, they used all of their heals over the course of that battle, doing great work keeping these guys and the Salamanders, Cold One Riders. I think I dropped a couple on Spearmen and Sauruses at a couple of points. I had these red-crested skinks in reserve. I could have brought them in to fight against the Chaos Warriors and the Chosen, but I never really got an opportunity or felt like I really needed them at any point, because, you know, most of the stuff on the field was stuff Saurus could deal with, you know? The only thing I would have really wanted to bring the red-crested skinks in against is the Chosen, and the Chosen got summoned in and just sat on the back objective the entire game. I don't know if you saw that or not, but that's where they were. They were there on the field, 1,600 gold, doing nothing the whole game. And honestly, I think these guys are kind of a waste in general. I don't think they're very good. They look cool, don't get me wrong, and they have some decent applications at times, but they're incredibly specialist, and they get picked off pretty easily, honestly, if your opponent just takes a little bit of time to pay attention to where they are and what they're doing. But yeah, well played to my opponent, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Peace.